A little bit after 6 o'clock. I think we've gotten most of the stragglers in. So thanks for coming tonight. We've got a presentation on proposed improvements along East Main Street, and we'll go through a pretty in-depth plan as to how that might happen. This room is a little bit awkward, so I apologize. I'm kind of standing in front of the screen, but trying to stay close to the mic because this is being recorded. So if you have neighbors that couldn't be here that want to get updated, they can watch this later. So we'll get started. So I'm Chris Pant. I'm with the Department of Public Works. Lisa Lane is with us. She's also with the Department of Public Works. She's our town engineer. Fred Leonardo is here from the Community Development Office, and our town planner, Jenny Gingras, is part of the project. She's not here tonight, but also someone who's involved. And we have a whole team here, and they'll introduce themselves as they come up from Howard Stein Hudson, and they're the consultant we're working with to start this project. So a number of things we'll go through, but basically we're going to give existing conditions, talk about how we got to where we are, talk about the proposal, and then look for your comments and questions at the end. And the real purpose of this meeting tonight is to get feedback. And we'll get to all these details, but I know up front, and at least in our past experiences, most people that show up, we want everybody to come, but most people that come have concerns or questions. And so I'm going to try and hit a few up front. So one, this project is in the very, very early stages. We haven't started designing yet. We have some concepts. We're about to start designing, but we want to get feedback from you all as potentially abutters or just residents or whatever the case may be. In terms of funding, the construction of this project, which is in the $8 to $9 million range, is not funded by the town. It's funded by Mass DOT, and it's part of we'll cover this in detail, but it's part of a process we entered to compete for funding that the state offers to do these sorts of projects, which are to improve traffic and pedestrian and bike mobility for communities. So, so there's constraints that go along with that money because we have to follow the rules that the person dictates who is providing the money. And so we'll talk about some of those things. In terms of timing, it's 2025. This project is on the program, so the funding document for 2030. So it's a few years away. So if you were looking for it next year, you've got a little bit of a wait. If things worked perfectly and other projects in front of us had to get bumped and we could be pulled forward, that's a possibility. Probably remote, but it's possible. And there's always the possibility if things come up that delay the project that it would be pushed back. But the point is we're a little ways away from executing this project. But it takes a lot of work to execute a project like this, and so getting feedback early is helpful. And again, that's why we're here tonight. So what's on the screen is a depiction of where we're talking about for the project. So I'll step back from the mic. But this is roughly where Hastings School is. You're going to follow East Main Street past Route 9 out to Thomas Newton Drive. You can see highlighted here are a bunch of different facilities along the way, and we know there's more communities further out, the Windsor Ridge and the Thomas Newton neighborhood and the Park Village, with lots of residents that we're trying to connect to the town through some improvements to bike and pedestrian mobility. We'll mention this later, but the project scope started with the intent to get from the school here out to Walker Street. So if any of you are from that end and wondering why we're stopping where we're stopping, it goes back to the funding source and the discussions we've had with Mass DOT. And that's still something I think the town intends to do eventually. Not sure when that's going to happen. It would basically be kind of a phase 2 to this, but based on the scope we have and the funding available, what's in that yellow line is what was able to be funded, at least for now. So next few slides have a lot of words. The point here is just that the effort to do this project is documented in guidance the town has produced. Maybe some of you were part of those documents. So the master plan highlights an intent to expand pedestrian and bike access for residents, along with address some traffic concerns. If you're familiar with East Main Street and Flanders Road, that intersection, at least at times, it gets pretty challenging. And so there's been discussion of that for 20 years about how to address that. And so this project is intended to hopefully address that issue. We also have a complete streets policy, and we're part of the state's Complete Streets program, which offers funding for projects that improve mobility by bike or pedestrian. And so there's some components on that list that would be addressed as part of this project too. So our goals, I've pretty much set them, right? We want to extend access to the community between the downtown and the outer limits by bike and pedestrian means of travel. And so the gist of this project is an 8-foot path that would extend from basically Hastings School, head towards the Flanders East Main Street intersection, resolve that with potentially a traffic signal, keep going, go under the overpass, the Route 9 overpass, and all the way out to Thomas Newton Drive. 8 feet, I mentioned that because back to the Mass DOT requirements, the requirement is actually 10 feet. And that's what their funding, directs. We intend, and we've already discussed, going back to them to get a waiver based on certain circumstances to get that reduced to 8 feet. But we're already starting at 10, trying to get it to 8. And again, all of these things will come up, but I can see it in people's eyes, like you just want to know what's going on. And so why don't we do other things? Well, there's other options we have. You can put in a sidewalk. Mass DOT is not going to pay for that. So if we want a sidewalk as a town, then that's an option we can pursue, but it's going to be a 5-foot wide sidewalk and the town's paying for it in some form or fashion. And I mentioned this project's in the $8 to $9 million range. So a 5-foot sidewalk probably isn't 8 to 9 million, but it's going to be several million to get to the same location. Other alternatives Mass DOT offers, if you don't do a 10-foot wide shared use path, are sidewalks on both sides of the street and then some bike lanes somewhere in between. It's kind of an alternative way to get away from the shared use path if that's not an option. In this case, at least from our perspective, looking at the corridor and the conditions that exist, it didn't seem to make sense to put 2 sidewalks, one on each side, plus bike lanes, because this shared use path, as many of you probably are anticipating, it will have some sort of impact on that corridor. But 2 5-foot sidewalks and bike lanes is probably going to, at least in our view, have more of an impact. So we discussed with Mass DOT the option of the 10-foot and the potential for the 8-foot path. So that's what all those words say basically is in terms of our goals. What I'm going to do now is hand it off to Howard Stein Hudson. They're going to walk through what's out there now. Many of you are familiar with that, but we're going to highlight what's there. And then we're going to talk about what we're proposing would go as part of this project. Chris?
Thank you, Chris. My name is also Chris. My name is Chris Lyman. I'm the project manager and lead civil engineer from Howard Stein Hudson for this project. My contact information will be at the end of this presentation, but again, you guys will probably be seeing a lot of me over the next couple of years being the lead on this project. If you guys ever have any concerns or questions, my contact will be at the end of the slide, so just don't be afraid to email me or contact me. I'm just going to kind of walk us through, Chris kind of already hit on about how this project was initiated with Mass DOT and how kind of we got the funding from Mass DOT for this project. Back in November 2022, we helped the town put together a rough estimate and a cost. We presented that to Mass DOT Project Review Committee. They liked the project, but they came back with some comments, mostly being the cost of the project. The original project was closer to about $12.5 million. And like he said, it would have extended all the way to Walker Street, which is roughly an extra half mile longer than what the current project is now. Master said they like the project. It's just the funding source. Each district only gets a certain amount of funding for each project year. And so $12.5 million would have been a good chunk of this district's money for that specific year. And they try to get a couple of communities for each year to make sure you spread out the money for each Mass DOT district. So they asked us to find a way to lower the cost of the project a little bit. And that's kind of why the project now goes from Hastings Elementary School to Thomas Newton Drive. That was kind of brought up in the June 2023 meeting we had between the town and Mass DOT. We resubmitted that project with the shorter limits and a cost of roughly $8.8 million, $8.5 million. Mass DOT approved that in November of 2023 with the funding year on the Transportation Improvement Program of 2030. Like Chris said, that's the current funding year now. But things always switch around with the districts. If our project's ready to bid and another project's not, it could leapfrog that and vice versa. It's always an opportunity. So we try to always make sure the project's always moving forward to make sure we can get the job done as quickly as possible. They said their participating cost would be about $8.8 million for the project. And the town would be responsible for both the design cost and the right-of-way acquisition. After the project was initiated, we started actually getting to the design process. So in November of 2023, we got our PCR funding. In May of 2024, we started collecting the actually existing data. So we got traffic collection data, and we reviewed that traffic. We started putting together a scope for the project, which is something we hand over to Mass DOT. So this is our plan for the project. This is our intentions for the project. Based on our traffic data, these are our potential safety countermeasures that we're thinking of doing. When I say safety countermeasures, I mean maybe high visibility crosswalks, curb bump outs, stuff like that. Basically, we're saying to Mass DOT, we think these are the appropriate measures for this corridor. We got through the scoping process, and then we got to something called the intersection control evaluation. This is only for intersections. It's not for the whole corridor. This was specifically for the Flanders Road and East Main Street intersection. You basically go through a stage where you come up with multiple different concepts for whether it's going to be, just a stop sign controlled location, a signal controlled, a roundabout. We look at all those options. We basically weigh them based on cost, effectiveness to safety, if they increase safety at a reasonable cost, because safety is the most important thing. Another thing we look at is potential environmental impacts, and we look at right-of-way impacts. Again, we don't want to make sure we're taking a whole bunch of people's land if it's not necessary, and if it doesn't increase safety compared to a more less conservative measure. So going through that, we determined that a signal would be the best option at Flanders Road and East Main Street. That was basically because the size of the roundabout needed at that location to allow for trucks to pass through would be quite large and would have a large impact to the residents around that location. And it also didn't add at this location, there wasn't tons of severe crashes. So that increase of T-bone crashes or head-on crashes wasn't a problem at this intersection. So it made it having a signalized intersection the more appropriate control option at this intersection. Once we got through that, then we go through something called the pre-25% design submission. That basically is where we do a very rough concept design, show it to the town based on all of our analysis, or show it to the town and show it to Mass DOT based on all of our analysis. We also submit something called the DJW at this point. It basically was a way of us justifying the reasons for our design, whether that's based off of safety, the amount of traffic, making sure that we're not impacting the level of service, which means we're not having major delays based on our design to the corridor itself. We submit that to Mass DOT, and we go through something called the over-shoulder process. That's basically where we sit down with Mass DOT again and talk about our different designs, funding, cost, making sure we're on the same page with DOT. Because again, they are funding construction, so they have some say in the design process and the overall approval of the design process. So we went through the pre-25% process, had the over-the-shoulder meeting, and once that was approved by Mass DOT, that's how we got to here today to the project information meeting. Once we have a conceptual project accepted by Mass DOT, we like to get then the public feedback from this. That's where we are today. I'm going to hand it over to Nick to go over the existing conditions.
Hi, I'm Nick Mans with Howard Stein Hudson. I am a civil designer and I work under Chris Lyman. So many of you already know the existing conditions of East Main Street, but along the east side of East Main Street, south of Route 9, there's a continuous sidewalk from Hastings Elementary all the way to the McDonald's. And on the other side, on the west side of East Main Street, there's limited sidewalk along the corridor to Route 9. And then north of Route 9, there is no existing sidewalk on either side of East Main Street. And there's narrow shoulders and no dedicated bicycle facilities throughout the project area. And you can see the picture there. That is just past Hastings Elementary looking east with the existing sidewalk. The existing sidewalk is probably in the 4 to 5 foot range. And along the corridor for the existing sidewalks, there's a lack of American with Disabilities Act compliant pedestrian curb ramps and sidewalks, which you can see in the picture that there's no marked crossing and there's no detectable warning panels for when a pedestrian were to enter the roadway, which is required to be compliant with the ADA Act. And there's a lack of crossings along East Main Street as well, including there's no crossing provided for the Boston-Worcester or the Airline Trail, but there is an existing crossing approximately 125 feet to the north. And the existing crossings generally lack safety measures such as painted crosswalks or curb extensions. And then looking at the Flanders Road intersection with East Main Street, there is a lack of gaps for left turning vehicles coming from both Flanders Road and from East Main Street. As you can see, the left photo is the queue on East Main Street and the right photo is the queue from Flanders Road. And as well for the crossing itself for pedestrians at Flanders Road, the crosswalk itself is faded and there are no detectable warning panels for people crossing the street. And it's generally an unsafe crossing for pedestrians trying to get across this already very busy intersection. And I'm going to hand it over to Angela to talk about the proposed improvements.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Angela Blaker. I'm the traffic engineer on this project. As you've heard, quite a few times now, the proposed improvements would be a shared use path that would extend along East Main Street. It would start at the Hastings Elementary School and it would go all the way to the Thomas Newton Drive intersection. It would provide a connection to the trolley line trail through a safe crossing location. And it would also provide access for pedestrians and bicycles to use these adjacent uses along East Main Street, as we mentioned in the locus map, some of those locations. And it would also provide a shared use path connection for that Hastings Elementary School to the south of the corridor. And then also at the East Main Street at Flanders Road intersection, as we mentioned, there would be a traffic signal that would be included. And that would also provide an exclusive pedestrian phase so that people would be able to cross without conflict with vehicles. It would provide high visibility crosswalk markings to provide a safe crossing to allow people to be visible to vehicles as well. And it would provide ADA compliant curb ramps, sidewalks, and pedestrian signal equipment. So just a little bit about the crossing locations that we're going to be providing. There will be 4. There will be one at the trolley line trail. There will also be one at the U.S. Postal Service, the more northern driveway crossing, so a little bit to the north, maybe about 300 feet. There will be one at the McDonald's driveway, which will provide a crossing for the trail to go from the east side of the road to the west side of the road on East Main Street. And then there will be one for the Windsor Ridge Drive, as that's a known desire line for pedestrians and bicyclists at this time. And just a little bit about how we evaluate these uncontrolled crossing locations. We look at the FHWA's STEP program, which allows us to evaluate safe crossing measures for these based on the roadway geometry, the volumes on East Main Street, as well as the posted speed limits, and those provide us with possible countermeasures for these crossing locations that would provide safety. So some of the crossing measures that we would provide for these would be high visibility crosswalk markings. We provide adequate nighttime lighting for visibility, crosswalk warning signs that would include advanced crossing warning signs as well. And then all of these locations do warrant an RFB for added visibility of pedestrians. And so now I'll give it back to Chris Lyman to talk about the cross sections.
Okay, so now the reason why kind of everybody came here, what is the design itself? So in the next couple slides, I'm just going to kind of go through what the design of this project is, how it's laid out, and what the cross-section of the project is. So I'm going to start off down at Hastings Elementary School, where the shared use path begins. The path will start on, I guess, the southern side of East Main Street, right before the driveway for Hastings Elementary School. There'll be a ramp roughly in this location right here, or I can point up here for you if it's easier, up in this location here, where bikes that are currently in the roadway will be able to ramp up onto the shared use path and give them access to a safe shared use path. It'll continue its way through on the south side, go down, and then continue to Flanders Road. At Flanders Road, it'll cross Flanders Road. We also have crossings going across East Main Street here at Flanders Road because this is a protected intersection now with the proposed signal, which will be the safest way to cross pedestrians from one side to the other. So anybody coming from Hastings Elementary School who needs to get to the other side, either to Shepherd Road or any of the locations along here, can now cross at Flanders Road. We're adding a sidewalk on this side to allow for connections not only to the post office, but to allow for better crossing some of these more side streets that run along here. Because I know there's been times where people cross here to try to get to those side streets across the street. As we're going down, we have the first proposed mid-block crossing, which is down here on this side, which is that Boston Worcester airline trail down here. That's the first mid-block crossing to try to connect to that existing trail that would connect to the shared use path. And as I go along, I'm going to pull up a cross section here of what it would kind of look like in this general section. Here's what it would generally look like. You have 4-foot shoulders, 11-foot travel lanes. We're also proposing to repave East Main Street along this corridor also, and so we can update the pavement markings to make for more appropriate shoulders and lanes. I do want to point out also, as Chris talked, we tried our best to narrow the roadway to help control speeds in the areas, but then also to make sure we're not impacting public property as we're putting in this path. The first one being making sure this was an 8-foot shared use path. We're trying to get the waiver with Mass DOT. During the pre-25% process, there was verbal approval. They'd be okay with that. And 25% of design is where we actually get the approval from Mass DOT that an 8-foot shared use path is okay. Right now we're proposing an 8-foot shared use path. The other thing we did is like I said, we moved curb lines in. So you can kind of see here, we're moving some of the curb lines in. Again, that's to make sure to make more room for that path. So we're impacting private property to the least extent practicable. That was the whole goal of this, was to add connectivity, add safety, but not impact private property and the residents who live along here. So as we're going along, this is the general cross section. You're gonna have a 2-foot buffer here. We've been talking with the town about what could be placed there. There's 2 options. You could have something more of like a landscape, like a grass buffer there. That may require a little more maintenance either from the town or from the residents who live there. They kind of have to maintain that little strip of grass in front of their property. At 2 feet, sometimes these landscape portions don't always, I say, succeed, meaning that that's a section where during winter season where you have ice, a lot of salt gets put on the road, and then when plows plow, a lot of times all that snow is going to land in that area, especially when they're clearing the path. So you're going to get a lot of salt buildup in this area, which unfortunately kills living things, kills grass, kills plants. So another option would be to put in a stamped concrete buffer here. That would be almost no maintenance whatsoever. Just gonna be a concrete, you've probably seen around, it's like the stamped concrete brick pattern that they put in a lot of places. It could be anything that the town would be fine with. It could be any color the town would be fine with. It's just a less maintenance, it's a more maintenance friendly version. And it can promise that you might not have a dead grass strip there in 2 years. I'm gonna show you some pictures later on of a general cross-section of a path that we did that's just like this. You're going to see a very green grass strip. It's because that strip was just planted 2 weeks ago. But this is the general idea of just this from Hastings Elementary to Flanders Road. As we go down, here's this grass strip I was talking about. This is roughly what your path would look like. You would have your RFBs, you'd have your curb line, you'd have your 2-foot wide buffer zone there, and then you'd have your shared use path like you see there. Again, like I said, this is nice and green right now, but it hasn't gone through a winter yet. And just from experience, 2 feet is very, very small for a grass. But again, if the residents want grass, it's definitely an option. We put it in here. We've put it in plenty of places. Another example I want to show here of a project that we've done that's very similar to yours is how we would ramp up and down from the existing roadway. So here's an example of a way we would ramp down into the roadway to allow pedestrians and vehicles that are walking in the roadway to ramp up. And again, you still have that RFB location there. And then as we keep going along from Flanders Road, this will run from Flanders Road to Route 9 eastbound ramps here. So as you get past Flanders Road, I talked about this mid-block crossing here. There's also an existing crossing that's generally in this location right here that goes to the post office. We've determined to move that for both safety reasons, because having 2 crossings too close to each other sometimes can cause problems with people wondering which crossing is going off when you press the RFB, and from a distance it's hard to tell where the pedestrians are walking across, whether in the closer one or the farther one. So we like to have distance between these crossings. So we're actually moving that post office crossing actually 1 spot down to the next driveway, so we have some separation. But we still wanted to make sure we gave a crosswalk for anybody in this retirement living facility down here, because I know that was important to the town. And then as you get along, we're going to keep the shared use path on that southern side. That's to avoid this whole interchange here with the Route 9 ramps. There's still also a shared use path there's a sidewalk currently here, so there's already a disturbed area there. It's a good spot to put shared use path. As we get closer to the Route 9 bridge, which is a little bit farther down, we're crossing over here at the McDonald's. There's a couple reasons for that. One, the slope on the south side as you get close to that bridge is extremely steep, so it would potentially require a very big retaining wall for you to keep it on that side. It also gets very narrow under that bridge, and currently there's already a sidewalk on the northern side as you cross under that bridge, so we're just connecting into that sidewalk and reconstructing it. And a great example of what kind of the general cross section would look like is you have the sidewalk on one side that would basically end roughly at the post office, and then you still have your shared use path on this side, still with the same lane distribution of 4-foot shoulders and 11-foot wide travel lanes. And then as you continue down to the McDonald's at this location, there's that mid-block crossing I was talking about. This is where the shared use path would shift over to the northern side of East Main Street, and it would go along McDonald's parking lot here. There is a potential for a small retaining wall. It'd be a very small modular retaining wall. It wouldn't be one where you'd have a massive retaining wall along here. And that's just to make sure we don't impact. There's an existing retaining wall that's farther up on that slope. We want to make sure that we're not impacting the existing retaining wall to McDonald's. So it'd be a very small retaining wall here. An example of what that would look like is it'd be roughly, a 3 or 4 foot tall retaining wall versus, a 10 to 12 foot high retaining wall. And then you can see here, it starts getting narrow in the roadway as we come along here. We're starting to narrow down as we get closer to the bridge here. At the bridge, this is where that narrowing is happening as we cross under Route 9. So as you come along, this is going to narrow down to a 6-foot wide path in this location. And the reason for that is because we didn't want to impact the foundation of the bridge itself. We wanted to make sure we'd be able to fit underneath the bridge and still keep the safe distance as you cross under there, because it does get very tight underneath there. And a cross section of roughly how this would look is we'd move down to 2-foot shoulders, 11-foot travel lanes, and it says 5.5-foot sidewalk there. You're including the curb. You have 6 feet at least. And then as you get past the Route 9 bridge here, the path would continue to stay on the north side of East Main Street going down. And that would continue all the way down past Haskell Street here. You'd have a crossing here at Haskell Street. We're also chasing Haskell Street a little bit farther down there. That's because there was concerns that was brought up both by the town and by Mass DOT that it's a tough little spot to get out of there, especially because you're on a steep grade there as you come up. We're looking to try to flatten that out a little bit so that at least if you're sitting up there, you at least have a flat spot where you can look both ways and then accelerate normally. Whereas if you're coming up a hill, you all know you're trying to get up that hill, it takes a little more time to get out. So we're trying to give you a little more time to make a decision at a flat. And we're also trying to make sure you have better sight lines. We are pushing the curb line a little bit in here. Again, doing the same thing, narrowing it a little bit to at least give you some more visibility farther out into the roadway. keep going along here. So this is roughly what that cross section would look like here. You have the 8-foot shared use path. Also, I want to say in this area, I know there's a lot of mailboxes as you get farther down East Main Street that will be impacted. You have a lot of mailboxes that are right on the street. That 2-foot buffer right there is our preferred area to potentially relocate your mailboxes. But again, that's another thing where we're open to comment. The town said they're open to anything that the residents would be willing to do, whether they want their mailboxes to put more to like a communal space, or if you just want them to stay in front of your house, that's where your mailbox would go, would be in that 2-foot buffer space. And then as we get down to the end of the project here, we have one more mid-block crossing here at the, you have the Windsor Ridge development there. So we have a mid-block crossing going there. And we also have, if you can see here, this is where the actually shared use path. So if you're coming down East Main Street heading west, any bicycles that are on that side of the street wanted to make sure they would be able to ramp up onto the shared use path and have a safe crossing to get over to the shared use path. So down in this location, I want to make sure you guys could see, down in this location, there'd be a ramp. So anybody that's in the roadway in that location would be able to ramp up, cross across the driveway here, and then go across the shared use path there. And then as you go down, it would say across, you'd cross Thomas Newton, and then it would ramp back down into the sidewalk, or into the roadway. So you basically would be able to pick up bikes coming from each direction at that location. And I had shown you this is roughly this. It roughly looked like the same cross section that it was farther down the roadway. Now I'm going to kind of get into the right-of-way, the potential right-of-way impacts. Again, we don't know the exact dimensions of these right-of-way impacts. We're very in the conceptual mode of this, but we do know there's going to be some temporary easements that are needed, and a lot of that's just going to be for grading, like regrading your lawn and regrading your driveway to make sure it ties into the path nicely and we're not causing any humps, bumps, stuff like that from your property to the path. There will be some permanent easements required. Most of those, I'll go through them. I have a table that can show them. There's also pamphlets that you guys got on these that kind of goes over. There's going to be permanent easements. Permanent easements are things that will stay once the project's done, whereas temporary easements are ones where we get the easement, we get construction easements. Once construction is done, those easements go away. So basically, once construction is done, there's no more easement. It's still your property. The permanent easements are a little bit different. Permanent easements, it's still your property, but a lot of times they're used for things like utilities. Most of these are for utility pole relocation, especially as you get up farther into the project. There's already a lot of poles here that are used to supply those homes for underground electric power. And there's a lot of poles that are along here that are used to get lines across the roadway and then underground. We just have to relocate those poles just to make sure they're not in contact with the path, and also to make sure they're not right up against the path. It's another concern that Mass DOT had was that with narrowing the path, if you're starting to put permanent objects right against the path, it even gets narrower, especially if somebody riding a bicycle, somebody walking. You want to make sure they're able to get all the way over. So you're passing a pole, the bike's going to be afraid to get too close to that pole because they might have a pedal strike, they might hit it. So we want to make sure we're giving people plenty of room to feel safe on the path. So we like to at least have those poles or any major objects 2 feet off the back of the sidewalk or back of the path. So that's what you're seeing a lot of these red dots down here. I also want to talk about these red dots down here. They seem like they're way far away from the project. It's not so much that, it's that this property here has frontage on Turnpike Road and has an address on Turnpike Road. So that your parcel dot actually shows up closer to Turnpike Road. The real impact that's happening is actually the back of that property, just abuts East Main Street. So there'll be a small impact at this location, and then the same thing down here. This property has basically backs up, their backyard backs right up to East Main Street. So it's not that we're impacting, these aren't showing exactly where the impacts are happening, they're just showing the properties where they are happening. And then we'll also have alterations right at Flanders Road at this location. Those alterations will be small alterations. They'll basically just be for the traffic signals. Very small alterations. They'd be roughly, 3 to 4 feet by 3 to 4 feet. When I say alteration, it means that basically the town right away would kind of alter in there just to make sure that the traffic signal equipment would stay within the town layout because they would own that traffic signal. The other permanent easements along here are really just for, like I said, the utility pole easements. These utility pole easements are very small. It just allows for somebody who maybe would need to go up and access the pole to go up to the pole and be able to walk around the pole. So they're roughly pretty small, 3 to 4 feet, same idea, just surrounding the pole. And then there's a few right in this location here also where the path, about 6 inches of the path will be on property, which is why we require permanent easements to those locations. Anywhere where the path is on private property, we would put in a sidewalk easement and it'd be a permanent easement. I have a list, and I think you guys have it in your hands too. You're going to see we have a lot of temporary easements. But again, like I said, these temporary easements are normally for grading and driveway reconstruction, just to make sure that your lawns are in your landscaped areas are tying back into the path. We're not causing very weird grade changes. Same with driveways. We want to make sure that we keep your driveways as accessible as they were before, making sure we're not altering them. That's why we need a lot of these for these driveway reconstruction areas. You can see most of these are all for grading. We also have one for some wall construction. This is closer to the McDonald's parking lot there. That's just to make sure that we can grade behind it and make it safe. And then the ones that people are probably more interested in are, again, like I said, the permanent easements and those alterations I talked about. As you can see, most of them I talked about are for utility poles. There's 2 locations farther down the corridor where they're used for the shared use path and the RFBs. And then you have the 2 alterations I talked about at Flanders Road. That's for the traffic signals at that location. Again, this is very conceptual, so if there's concerns by any of the residents, please bring them forward. This isn't set in stone. None of this is set in stone. The whole point of this process is to get you guys to voice your opinions, voice your concerns, and we can go back to the drawing board and when we get to 25%, try to incorporate your concerns into that design, and then we would actually come back in front of you guys, which I'll get to in a minute, at a DPH where you can see how we've listened to your concerns and try to address your concerns at another public meeting like this. So what's next for the project? So the next thing for the project would be to move on to 25% design, which we submit to Mass DOT in the town roughly this summer. After that, we'd go to that design public hearing I was talking about. This gives the public another chance to come back, look at the full design where we have grading set, we have our easements hopefully set, and we have more information about what's to be, we have more idea of the impact numbers that are going to happen to each property. After that design public hearing, we'd move to 75% design submission. That'd be roughly the next summer. And then in spring of 2028, we go to 100% design. I just want to note, because it can get confusing people, what each one of these means. At 25%, we're really looking at the major impacts to properties, to the environment, to the flow of the intersections in it. That's really what we're looking at 25%. Once we have an agreed upon with both the public and Mass DOT, we start going into full plan design. And really that's 75% design. So we start submitting any environmental permitting we need for review at that point. We start submitting right-of-way plans, which is a big part of this process, the plan that the town's got to start getting working into. That's where you start submitting a lot of your right-of-way plans at 75% design. And we start really getting into like the grading and the overall full cost of the project. We know what the cost is roughly here, but you get a lot more detail here at 75% design. And then at 100% design, that's hopefully where we take in all the environmental impacts we potentially have. There's a few wetland areas along here, so we'd have to get from both your Concom and Mass DEP, we'd have to get their comments and make sure we put that into our 100% design so we can get the permits required for the project. That 100% design is also hopefully where we have approved right-of-way plans. The big point of that is that making sure we have approved right-of-way plans. We've approved certificates and permits from any environmental agency that we need to get them from. And that's when we move to something called its plan specification estimate. That's basically called PS&E. That's where the project is basically ready to go out to bid. We've gotten all the permits, certificates we need. We have the public backing. We have Mass DOT backing, and we have all the right-of-way acquisitions that are required. And that's looking to be roughly in the winter of 2028. And then, again, you can see there's a bigger gap here, about a year of when the project will go out to bid. There's a lot that can happen between contracts between this and this with Mass DOT and the town. So we just like to have a little bit of buffer to make sure the project goes out on time. But like I said, if the project's ready earlier than that, that's something where we can go to the district and say, oh, we have a ready project, shovel-ready project. And if they have a project that's lagging behind, they could swap those out. That's where that starts to happen in the process. But we're looking to at least bid out the project and start construction of spring of 2030. And then, like I said, you can either contact me at Howard Stein Hudson. You can scan the QR code for more information. That'll bring you to the Westborough website, or you can contact Director of Planning, Jenny, here at the Town of Westborough, if you have any concerns. She'll pass them on to me. And then I think I'll open it up for questions.
Question on sidewalks.
Yep.
Would the people that are on, at the sidewalk?
Would you mind just giving us a name and an address just so that we know?
Yep. Charles Stankowski, 198 East Main Street. And so are the people who have the sidewalks in front of their house responsible to shovel those sidewalks during the storm, during the winter?
Something for the town.
Yeah, it would be no different than the way it is now for people that have sidewalks in front of their houses. So the town does plow certain sidewalks based on a select board policy, but other sidewalks are,
There isn't any there, so what happens?
it would be the same as it is for other residents that have sidewalks now.
We don't know what that is.
There's no formal requirement for people to plow their clear their sidewalks, but it's encouraged. And then there are select sidewalks around the town that are plowed by the town. And this location, I think we still have time to figure it out, but I would suspect, based on the intent that the town has to create this connectivity, that this shared use path would probably end up being plowed by the town, but I'm not saying that's what the town do. I'm just saying that's what I think would likely happen.
Yeah, because shoveling an 8-foot wide path across your entire property.
Right.
Is pretty unrealistic for someone who's probably gonna be almost 7.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's a major road, and if you've ever tried to shovel any of that snow on your driveway, never mind an extra 100 feet of 8-foot wide section there, and that's something that should be addressed. There's also, if you're requiring the owners to take care of that and do that, now are they responsible for if someone does a Jimmy slips and falls in your property? Or it's not even your property, really, because that really is the town, right? But if you're responsible to shovel that or clear that, now you're putting yourself at potential liability for someone who slips and falls in that property. That, to me, is something that should be addressed in this before anything happens in writing, that people are not responsible for it, that the town will need to be. It's 8 feet wide. You're not talking about a little tiny path. You're talking about 8 feet wide. Right?
Yeah. And we have multiple locations around the town where, like, next summer we'll be building one on Otis Street. So I think it's a great point. I think we have time to figure out the policy side of that so that it's clear, obviously, before this thing is introduced, that it's understood whose requirement it is to plow.
And are our questions on record or for questions like that to be answered?
Yes.
Yes.
We're taking notes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think it's something that, like, the town has to be responsible for that. People can be responsible for 8-foot wide swath, taking care of it, liabilities that would be subject to that. The other thing is, under the bridge, there's only like a 3-foot walkway there. Maybe it's 3.5. It can't be more than 4. And how are you gonna put like 6 feet under? That's really narrow. Is the DOT gonna be okay with, there's an 8-foot everywhere for a bike path and that, but there you're going under a bridge that's already extremely narrow. I can't imagine 2 people in a bicycle trying to go underneath that bridge in traffic time.
Yeah, we did, through that pre-25% process, the over the shoulder, that was a sticking point, was that one bridge. And we worked with DOT saying they would be okay with having that 6-foot wide sidewalk through there. Just because the only other option would be to completely redo the Route 9 bridge. And I don't think the town want to include that in their project. A, would delay the project. It could also increase the cost where this project potentially wouldn't happen. Again, that bridge could be replaced down the line, and when that bridge is replaced, they'd probably widen it out to make sure it fits in. But just to make sure we can at least get through that Route 9 bridge and it's not a stopping point for a path for people, we did make a recommendation with Mass DOT that they'd be okay with a 6-foot wide sidewalk for now. It's not going to be permanent. There could be 10, 20 years down the line where they widen that out and becomes, but they're okay with having a 6-foot wide path there now.
And the next question is, it's really not 8 feet wide. You got the 2-foot buffer, so you're gonna go into everyone's property by 10 feet at least, or are you narrowing the road in certain sections, particularly in front of 198? Because now 10 feet is close. My next door neighbor, their house is even closer to the road. And at 10 feet, you're literally on the steps to the house. So are you narrowing the road there as well?
We are narrowing the road in some spots. The only places where there actually will be path on private property are these couple of locations here. So you have 210 East Main Street. You can see the shared use path will require permanent easement because it's going to be on your property. There's another location down here at 216 East Main Street where the shared use path would be on your property. And then the last one would be 188 East Main Street. Everywhere else, the path itself is within the town right of way. So the town, it would be in town property.
So is the road being narrowed?
It is being narrowed, yes. It's being narrowed in some areas, not everywhere, but areas where we saw that we could narrow the roadway and not impact private property, we did bring it in. And we went through that with Mass DOT to make sure we were trying to get a more consistent cross section through the roadway too, because there were certain areas where you had really big shoulders and then really narrow shoulders. We were trying to make sure that if you're driving down it, you'd have the same lane width the entire way through the corridor, and then you have the same shoulder width the entire way through the corridor. Because the wider your shoulder is going to be, potentially the more higher speeds you're going to have. We're trying to, have it more consistent, so we're keeping more consistent speeds closer to that speed limit, and then also allowing for shorter crossings. So we tried to really bring in the roadway where we could to make sure it would increase safety, hopefully slow people down, and make a more consistent cross section of the roadway the entire length of East Main Street.
The other thing is, I know that you're going to try to flatten the road at the top of Haskell, but to me, I want to go on record as being concerned about people coming down the street at 50, 60 miles an hour regularly, tons of accidents at that location. Now you're going to put a bike path and a footpath, and the bikes are going to be flying down that road right across that intersection where people are trying to get out. And to me, that's a personal safety issue with that location being, especially where it's all downhill. Cars are flying, bicycles are going to be flying, people are going to be walking or running, and you got these people trying to pull out of it. Again, I don't know if anyone here has tried to pull out of Haskell. It's like almost impossible. There's accidents all the time. I can't tell you how many times I go out to help the people that basically someone pulled out in front of them or the opposite, because of course everyone wants to blame someone else. I go out there all the time for accidents. I can't imagine adding more safety issues there for that area, and want to go on record to say that might need to be addressed or should be addressed, how that can be made more safe for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and as we go through the process, we are going to be analyzing all these locations. Again, we do have traffic data we've been looking at. We have crash data we've been looking at. But we get more in depth with those as we go farther into the process. A lot of that analysis happens now and then to 25%. So you bringing that up, we'll definitely put it on, make a note of it, and we'll make sure to look at that location. For definitely crashes, because that's the big thing too. We're trying to improve safety along this corridor. And so we look at a heat map of where crashes are happening along. We try to make best improvements we can at those locations. And then also we go to honestly to Mass DOT traffic and we see what are your ideas here, because it has to be approved not only by Mass DOT traffic, it has to be approved by us, it has to be approved by the town. So we have 3 agencies making sure that we're trying to do the best thing for the corridor and not trying to put people at risk. Make sure to do that.
You yield the floor. Sorry for taking all the time.
So my concern is, I have a protection wall on 198 Spindle. So, long story short, my fear is, so our house was built in 1810. Our foundation is stone. With that retention wall, I need assurance that you're gonna make a decent retention wall, but then all of a sudden my basement that's never flooded, now floods because the retention wall is not what the retention wall should be, and it's a cul-de-sac. So I want to know, how are you going to keep my driveway with the integrity that my driveway has, and now my front yard and my side yard doesn't get flooded, and also there's a retention wall going to 194, because down there's water all the time. So will we have more idea, will we see more definition of what your actual plan is when you knock down the wall, put up a new wall, and regrade all that?
Yeah, what address for you again? Sorry.
what, my 196 is being right next to the.
Gotcha, okay, 196.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're on the list for the wall to be moved.
Yeah.
Right, they're gonna move my wall.
yeah, so 100%, when we get into 25%, we're really looking at grading about what's gonna happen, and our goal is to never cause more problems over there already. It's always to try to help improve these locations. There is a couple of retaining walls, especially as you get farther, I guess, northeast up the project, there's a lot of these stacked stone retaining walls. We will definitely be, any ones that we impact, we will be replacing and putting back out there to make sure that we're not impacting grades where water will be going towards your house. But again, we won't know that information about how big the impact would be to replace the retaining wall until we get into 25%.
Okay, because the retaining wall is pretty much the whole.
Yeah, there's a couple of them down there where you have those stacked stone retaining
Yeah, all
walls.
right down
Yeah.
there, it's all retaining wall.
Yep.
And it was built probably in the 1800s.
Yeah, they're pretty old. If we're impacting them, I can promise you they'll be restacked. Normally, we'll do a masonry stack to keep. We want to make sure we keep up the historical look of it. We don't want to put like just a concrete wall. A lot of times, if we're impacting a stone stacked wall, we'll put it back. We'll make it a masonry reinforced a lot of times, so they'll stack them
Okay.
to make sure it doesn't fall. But again, we'll know more about that when we get back out there and see really what the grading is, because there's a few locations where we have retaining walls we're impacting, where we have utility poles or utilities we're impacting, and we'll get more of that information at 25% design.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hi, my name's Ellen Google, 84 Fisher Street. I'm on the Active Transportation and Safety Committee, and I want to thank DPW and everybody for getting this going. I know I'm really excited that there's going to be some improvements for safer walking and biking here in town. But I did have a question about overall design. I'm wondering if you can go back to the picture of the corridor picture with the 8 feet. So that, I know there's some concern about 8 feet being not wide enough. So my question, you've got a 4-foot shoulder on each side. Is that because the 4 feet is the required amount? So you couldn't make it 10 feet using some of the shoulder?
Yeah, no, based on, Angela's going to know a little more of this, but based on the speeds and the volume of traffic that goes down East Main Street, you're required to have these 11-foot lanes and the 4-foot shoulders. That's the minimum that we talked to with Mass DOT when we talked about shrinking the roadway.
Okay, I thought that might be the answer.
Yeah.
So then my next question is, and I bike there all the time already, including past Haskell Street. I've never had a problem. But I bike down East Main quite often through this area. I'm typically in the shoulder. So my question here is 8 feet being a little bit, is it narrow for all the users? I'm going to guess it's fine if I use the shoulder as a cyclist still. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, we're putting the shared use path in there, but people are going to use the roadway how they're going to use the roadway. I would never stop you. I would say it's safer to be on the shared use path.
Oh, I
Well,
probably
yeah.
would be if there weren't a lot of people
Yeah.
walking there, but if I'm seeing something, I might just say, hey, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to
That-
get in the road.
And again, like, it's like anything else. I can't restrict you from doing what you're doing on the roadway. I can just design it to be as safe as possible and use the way it's supposed to. But whatever way you choose to use the roadway, it's how you choose to use the roadway.
All right, thank you.
Hey, could you bring up the mid-block crossing at the McDonald's?
Yep.
Mark Silverberg, 7 Weld Street.
Oops, go the wrong way here. Should be the next one. Sorry, these lag a little bit just because they're bigger files.
That's all right.
I think it's the next one right here. Come on. There we go. Now I promise you this one. There we go.
Okay, so that crossing is far enough from the bridge so that cars heading westbound will have enough time to see the beacons?
Yeah. So we did look at that because again, you're going down the bridge, giving your line of sight. We do look at stopping sight distance when we place these. That's part of the step evaluation that Angela kind of talked about to make sure. We actually moved. There's kind of a crossing here. We actually even moved it back because we wanted to make sure that we weren't impacting with this driveway and this driveway. We wanted to make sure it was a little bit farther away from all those turning vehicles. But we did do a stopping sight distance evaluation.
Okay. And then could you just go to the next cross-section where,
Is it the Windsor?
side of the bridge?
Yep. This one right here.
Yeah, that Route 9 westbound on and off ramp, that's a pretty hectic intersection. Will there be any center crossing island or some type of signalization there to help people cross there, because you've got a lot of traffic movement going in different directions?
Yes, we looked at one alternative here, putting in a center refuge island there. The biggest problem we came up here is that a lot of trucks come along on Route 9, and the way it 90s so quickly over is that a truck coming down this location, in order to not hit a car here, needs to make a big swing this way, and their trailer actually drags. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced with the truck, but their trailer is actually going to drag even pretty close to that turning lane already. So if we were to put a center island there, the truck wouldn't be able to make that turn anymore. And we can't really push the roadway any farther this way because of how quickly those slopes get to the bridge. There's already a guardrail that kind of runs that we're moving right along here because of how steep the grade is going down there. I know there was talks about putting this into the ice signal here. They didn't see it as needing a signal when we talked to Master T from the beginning. Flanders Road was one of the only locations they saw as potentially needing signal control at that location.
What about rapid flashing beacons?
So there wouldn't really be effective here because they potentially would be facing the wrong direction, so you couldn't see them. We do know it's an extremely long crossing. We're going to keep looking into ways maybe we can add a refuge for, because it is extremely long. I agree with you. Trying to add in a way, having somehow put a refuge or something there. It's definitely on our radar. I did a couple of the turning movements here, and I couldn't believe how much room a truck would need just to make those turns. Because I do agree it's a very long crossing, and it is hectic. As a pedestrian, you have to look to see if there's a car taking right here, cars taking left and right out of here. There's a lot going on at this location.
You almost know it stops there.
Yeah.
Go every day.
So we definitely are gonna keep looking at countermeasures we can put in there to at least make pedestrians feel more safer there, and maybe signal to traffic there is somebody entering.
Suzanne Parks, 79 South Street. So my question is, I have granite curbs. I really like my granite curbs, especially when they're brand new and popped everybody's tires if they try to get too close. Are we gonna have continued granite curbs along this whole area so I feel safer up on that sidewalk than down in the road?
The current proposed is granite curb along the entire route.
On one side.
Yeah, on one side, on the side of the path side.
That side of the passage,
Yes.
but not the other side?
Yeah.
Okay, and then my next question, just out of curiosity, you know you're going in 8 feet, how far back off the road does the town property actually go?
So it can vary. It's not like the middle of the roadway is exactly the middle of the town layout. It kind of goes how the path goes. As you get close to Route 9, it switches from the southern side to the northern side where that layout kind of switches over. And so just based on this, roughly, so I'm just showing it here, but if you're on the north side of East Main Street after Route 9, there's roughly about 10 feet, which is why that path basically perfectly fits between the roadway and the property. So as you come, now if you're on this side, it's a little bit tighter on that side, which is why we kind of use that side. We kind of bumped out the roadway a little bit on this side, again, to try to steal some space and move it closer this way. And then you can see the same thing if I pull up the one before that. As you get closer to the elementary school at the beginning of the project, it actually switches to the other side where there's more room, which is why they probably put that existing sidewalk on that side, because there was more town right away on that side.
So basically, if we were to make it an inch wider, you'd have easements on every single property that the sidewalk is on.
If there was a
Shared use path.
If there's a 10-foot shared use path, probably every property along the project would have some sort of sidewalk easement. So that's why we work with the town and with Mass DOT to say we're trying our best not to impact private property. If we do an 8-foot shared use path, we can do it without impacting private property to the max extent practical.
And just to follow up on the width of the road, Chris isn't being very specific because it's not consistent the entire route. So as part of this process, last year or maybe year before that, the entire corridor was surveyed. So we know where the right of way is exactly, but we would have to pull up a specific plan to get down to the foot. But basically, what Chris said is the sidewalk that we're proposing in general is where the right of way exists for us to use to not impact or to limit impacted properties.
Yeah, from that design, especially as you get farther up this section to the northeast side of the project, I can tell you that it's only a few inches from the existing back, the proposed back of the path to the property. There's not a lot of room there. As you get more to the southern side, there's a little bit more room in that section where you can. That's why there's less impacts as more to the southwest side of the project. But as you get to the northeast, it really is, there's not tons of room to do work there within the town right away.
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up question that I forgot to ask, but this is reminding me of it. With the 4-foot shoulder, is that going to be consistently 4 feet throughout the whole corridor?
It'll be consistent except at the bridge.
Oh, well, yeah,
yeah.
we discussed the bridge, because the way striping's been done in this town, the travel lane for motor vehicles is standard, but then you're kind of forced into the curb or the road.
Yeah, no.
But I thought that was the answer, and I'm happy that's the answer.
Yeah, anywhere, to be honest, where I could make it more consistent cross-section, we did. That's why we're doing a lot of, the reason why we're paving is because we're doing also a lot of curb work to bring it in certain areas to make it more
That's
consistent.
what I thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that striping that you're referring to in other locations is not because we can't measure from the center to the outside of the road, but because the width of the road varies on many of our roads. And so we want the width of the lane to be consistent. And so we measure from the center to, the outside. And if it's got a white line, a fog line on it, then it's measured to 10 feet or whatever the distance is. And so there are sections on many roads where, beyond the white line, it's varied width.
Right, and as you say, that's just striping. You're rebuilding here, so you can make it consistent 4 feet.
Yeah, if you're talking about like not painting hardscape, we're trying to make the width of the roadway a little more consistent the entire
You're set. So love to hear that you're trying to narrow the roadway, because that will make people go slow. I was at that stop for a pedestrian near McDonald's, and the road is so wide, someone went around me and almost hit the person there. So the narrow roadway will be a key move. Would you mind going back to that part of the slide where that's at?
Could we get your name right?
Oh, sorry. Eric Waite, 7 Franklin Ave. All right. So the cars that are queuing to take a left to get on Route 9, especially in the morning, you're missing about 6 inches of space for those like myself and others who are proceeding up East Main Street. I don't know if there's a possibility, just factor in. We're talking about maybe like a 12 or 15 foot area. And if you're there, you can see that the grass has been matted down because cars try to squeeze by, and then the dirt is pushed down. And the reason I really push for that is because a nervous driver that has those people who are anxiously trying to get by is more likely to take a dangerous turn. And if there was a way to not widen the road greatly, but I'm talking about just a foot, would be enough for cars to proceed safely around them. So that's just one.
Yeah, so I think we're saying that cars coming this direction trying to make this left-hand turn,
No.
or the other way.
No. So, how do you
Okay.
turn it?
It's that one right there.
Okay. So right here,
Okay, gotcha.
cars are going this left.
Oh, okay,
And these people are trying to get around them, and it's just like a foot too tight.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's just the
Yeah, so you're saying is there a way potentially where we can add a little bit of space so cars can still slide?
Yeah, which again would be, I think, a big safety, because they really queue up, people get frustrated, cars are going up on the curb.
Yep.
So that's number one. Number two was the bridge. This is really, I think, the stoppage, right, is that people are not going to feel, they don't feel safe right now. It's always precarious when you see folks walking under the bridge. There's a desire path there, right? So it is happening. So this is great to hear that you've got some progress on that. A couple things I would throw out there to recommend is lighting. Potentially paint that side white, because it's dark, it's loud, the traffic over you is going 60 miles an hour. It psychologically doesn't feel safe, right? What you're going to do is going to make a big difference. And what's great about the bridge down here by Dunkin' Donuts is the way it works is the sidewalk is elevated. So, cars are going to come in, it's going to be darker. If there's any way to even just 10, 12, 14 inches, so you have that real barrier, physical, but psychological. It doesn't feel unsafe walking under the bridge, going from Dunkin' Donuts towards the road. But this guy here, if there was a way, and I know cost is a big part, but just to have a little,
So a little bit higher.
just the side, just the side. And then the last thing I'll ask is, it appears that money had you stop short. Olman's is gonna be a destination, right? So you're kind of, what, you're spitting distance, you're almost there. So what happens for the kids who leave Hastings or whatever and head up and they're, 85 yards away or so? So are we envisioning there? Because I don't think there are any sidewalks that
No,
are gonna
so-
continue on.
Yeah, I know exactly what
Yeah, right?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, 'cause when I originally worked with the town on this, we did have it. It was nice that we're hitting all these important parts for the town along East Main Street. Again, kind of like the town said, this is just potentially phase one. We can go back to Mass DOT after this project is initiated and done and say, hey, we ended it here. We have more desire to go further.
Yeah.
And that's always something you can submit to Mass DOT. We can go through the same process here. As of right now, what's happening here is we're connecting the shared use path into the existing sidewalk that goes to Thomas Newton Drive. And then after that, basically, if you're coming down, we're putting you back into the roadway. Because there is no sidewalk down there. And the same thing along here, that if you're walking along this side of the roadway, there's a ramp up here so you can at least get onto a sidewalk and either go to Windsor Ridge or you can come to this crossing and get there. So fortunately, you're past the product limits, you're probably gonna do what you're doing now and unfortunately walking the shoulder for right now. But again, the town can always reapproach Mass DOT and find different grant processes to help extend this farther.
Well, when you go have that meeting with them, bring a couple pints of Chunky Monkey and maybe you can,
It's one of my favorite ice creams. Yep, go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you. David Baumgart, 225 East Main Street, friends with you all. Also applaud you doing this and also applaud getting out in front of it in the town and taking the input from the town. Very important to people to embrace it and voice their concerns. And also for the connectivity. Also wish and hoping for Part B and Part C of this to expand it. One question I have, and this is more of a risk analysis, I guess, on your end. Do you have, how much experience do you have with getting this waiver from going to 10 feet to 8 feet? And does that pose a risk to the entire project, or do you feel fairly confident that the waiver will get accepted?
Based on our talks with Mass DOT, they've been very involved with it. They are very okay with going to 8. We talked about at the pre-25 over the shoulder brought up. We do something called, like I said, it's called the Design Justification Workbook. It's called DJW. It's basically a way, as me as an engineer, I'd say to Mass DOT, this is why I'm making the changes I'm making. And I have to basically base them in fact and data we collected. We put in there that we wanted to do 8. We started off with the town and honestly pushing to say, let's just try for the 8 and see what they say. And they didn't have many comments on it saying, don't do this. So I feel pretty confident. I can't guarantee it, but I feel based on the verbal talk with them during the Ochoa meeting that it's probably not going to be a problem for it to be 8, especially if it's going to be whether the project succeeds or fails. That's a big thing is the reason why we could get some of these waivers is because if it's going to have a critical negative impact to the surrounding community, whether it's to the environment, the residents, open space, anything, that's one way for us to justify why we're doing 8 feet. So I think we have a pretty strong case to ask for 8 feet and get approved for 8 feet.
Okay, great to know, thank you.
Back to them.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Haskell to East Main Street, what we have to do there, and would that include sidewalks on Haskell there for the people that those neighborhoods to access the
Yes. Yep, so we haven't got completely into exactly the grading of this, but talking with both Mass DOT traffic and our traffic engineer, Angela here, we're really going to try to flatten out this top part here so that if you're behind the stop line, you're not sitting on a slope, you're at least sitting on flat. It allows you to, when you hit the gas, you actually move instead of kind of lag behind. It also helps you to have a better sight view because instead of looking kind of more up like this, you're more up flat where the roadway is. So that's kind of the plan there. We don't intend to put any sidewalks down there right now because of how tight the right-of-way is there. I mean, it's hard to see, but there's a black line here, and there's a black line right here, and that's how close the roadway is to, Haskell is to private property. So if we were to put in sidewalks there, we'd probably be impacting either this property here or this property here on the corner, just because of how close the right-of-way lines are there. But they will be able to walk up and access the shared use path. But again, we really don't have the full details for that, but our plan is to at least flatten out so that if you're sitting at the stop bar, you're able to at least be at a flat grade and be able to look left and right and make a decision, and at least be able to accelerate into a lane, feeling a little more comfortable doing it.
that'll affect the two houses on either side of Haskell to raise that.
Yeah, it could potentially, we have to look at the grading a little bit more at this location just to see how feasible it is. But looking at it just with the naked eye like that, it definitely is feasible to do it. But again, this is gonna be something, an area where we look into a little more. It definitely was a concern that was brought up by the town, and we did see it in our, when we collected our data, that location.
I have a second question, if that's okay. And that's about the Planters Road and the signal there. So I guess my concern is, as somebody who has to drive that way all the time, that there'd be maybe increased major delays in that corridor, which already suffers from major delays. So how are you going to mitigate that? But when you get what,
No, but do you have that data with you at all? So,
because that already gets backed up way back. I don't know if you've ever seen traffic there, but you try to go down there between 4 and 6.
Yeah, so you're concerned about how it's going to impact the delays on planters and if it's going to make it worse? Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
East Main.
Oh, on East Main.
East Main.
Okay. Yeah. So you're concerned about like backups that are existing that go through that intersection, or when someone's trying to take a left turn?
I'm just concerned about the traffic jam that already exists on East
Oh,
Main.
yeah. So the signal was more so determined for safety, just to allow people on Flanders to be able to get out. So it would, stop people. We haven't done a full evaluation of the operations yet that would happen on East Main yet, but it would stop people, for 20, 30 seconds, like at most, I would imagine. So it would back up momentarily, but it would, dissipate, obviously, once Flanders Road had a red light again. But the idea is more so to be able to get people from Flanders Road up, because we know that is a significant backup. Yeah, and it's a safety concern too. Yeah, so it's more so for safety that it's being evaluated. Yeah, and that's something that we can look into and see how we can try to mitigate those operations and, that potential queue spillback, yeah.
To me, it's shocking that there's more accidents in Haskell than there is in Flanders, but Flanders is tough getting out.
Yeah, Flanders is really tough to get out. There's a high volume that comes out of there right now, during those peak hours. And I saw it coming here, so yeah, it happens, throughout the 4 to 6 hour period,
yeah, we are hoping that the signal, at least, because I know at least some of the backup that happens on East Main Street, at least from what I saw, is that it's because the cars can't make that left turn. We're hoping that light at least gives them the delay to at least let some of these cars make their left turns, and which would allow through traffic to be able to come through clear.
Well, what happens is the signal alignment in East Main is, that's where it just log jams there. And so it's backed up going all the way to center of town, and then it backs up all the way back the other way. So
All the way
it doesn't have a lot,
Yeah.
Flanders has some impact, but it's mostly,
East Main Street.
yeah.
Yep, yeah, and the volumes are high on East Main Street. It's like 16,000 vehicles a day, so it is very high. So that's part of the reason it's tough to get out of Flanders. You don't really have
As
a
somebody
lot
who lives over in the Haskell area, you have to, you just don't travel that. I have to go all the back, I have to go down Lyman Street and around and out to Mill Street to get to the center of town. Otherwise, I'll be in traffic for a half hour just trying to get 5 minutes down the road.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned that that's gonna get worse with lights and pictures.
Yeah, and like Andrew said, we will look at operations of intersections adjacent. That's the whole point of when we do this evaluation, we do look at intersections adjacent to the project, because what we don't want happening is, like you said, it backs the entire way. We don't want to cause safety concerns where you're gridlocked in Flanders Road. So we do always evaluate intersections that are in close proximity to our project location to make sure that everything's working and hopefully in the most efficient way possible.
Tom Dolan, 2 Flanders Road, I'm right on the corner of East Main. Excuse me, great presentation, thank you. Question for the crowd, I guess. Everybody, all the homeowners here are gonna have questions about the edges of their property. How they're making that. Where can they go to get kind of an overlay of what currently exists and where the new road's gonna be exactly located? To get detailed info on exactly how they property.
Yep. So you guys can always, it's gonna take me a minute. You guys can always contact me. I'm gonna put back up my information here. Never be afraid to email me. There's also a QR code where the town has put together a project website that should have at least these plans up on it, and will potentially have the right-of-way impact plans, the right-of-way impact table that we have on it. So you can always look at that. Also, don't just be afraid to email me, and I'll kind of say, again, I can't tell exactly how much is going to be impacted right now at this second because of how concept this is, but as it gets into 25%, if you guys have concerns it's going through, please don't.
I'm guessing you have overlays, you have current and then proposed,
Yeah, so
and those are pretty well defined at this point, even recognizing they're gonna change. But
yeah, so we at least know that if you're along the path, based on the way grading happens, is that normally at the back of sidewalk, I like to at least have 2 feet to be able to at least in flat areas match back in very nicely and not cause either, drainage problems, any sort of problems. But then also Mass DOT requires a 5-foot construction easement off of that, and that could be potentially to make sure we're protecting any trees that are on your property, to make sure that if somebody's grading, to make sure they can step over where they're working and work, especially with driveways too. Big driveways, you need rollers for the roll back and forth when we're doing driveways. So on the plans, you might see 2 lines. You might see a limit of grading line where we're grading up to, and then you might see a bigger line. Like, well, that's very far away from the project. It's only because Mass DOT requires a 5-foot offset. It's not that anything's being impacted there. It just might be that there might be workers needing to step on there or work on there to be able to work on the project itself.
that's great. Is it best to go through you or through Chris Payon's office to get those types of details?
You can go through either one. No matter what, if you go to Chris, he's probably gonna ask me to give the information anyway. So if you go through me, that's completely fine. And we'll definitely document it. Sorry.
Evan Ross at 5 Smith Street. I think it's a great project. I have a couple questions about the buffer space. If you locate mailboxes within the buffer, are there any concerns from MassDOT's Complete Streets Group about putting those there and effectively reducing the buffer space?
Not necessarily. I mean, there might be concerns. Again, like I said, we don't have to put permanent objects in certain areas. But again, if it's the difference between me giving you a community mailbox like way far away where you have to walk to it, or having to put a mailbox in your house, which I'm sure the local service won't be very adamant to on a busy road like that, there is ways we can say this is just like the only place to put it. So that buffer zone, sometimes we like to keep it as clear as possible, just like I said, to make sure it doesn't feel very narrow in certain spots. But sometimes there's just nothing you can do. It's either your mailbox with your house or it's for the community space. I think it's a good spot for them to place them at least. Because I mean, you already have mailboxes that are right against the roadway to be in now. But it is something that will come up with Mass DOT. I'm sure they'll say, make sure to watch out for putting permanent objects in that buffer zone. But that buffer zone is more to actually make you feel safer, to be less separated from traffic and from falling off the roadway. But it's for both.
And then just another thing, you have a pretty large area where you're increasing your impervious surface, and you're moving the curb lines as well. How much consideration has gone into like down the road, drainage modifications and stormwater treatment, that kind of stuff, if you have to install any DMPs or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a process we definitely have to go through. That'll be something we have to go through Mass DOT. We have to fill out a couple of forms of Mass DOT projects, one of them being a water quality data form. That water quality data form is where that analysis happens. We determine the current impervious surface along the entire project corridor, and then we determine the proposed, and it'll give us that net gain or loss. And then from that, the water quality data form will actually say what best management practices or what type of drainage facilities might be best for this area to make sure that we're not, causing more pollutant to the area, making sure that we're at least treating water before it reaches facilities. So that's definitely a process we go through. It's through the water quality data form for that.
Could you get the address and name?
Evan Ross, 5 Smith Street.
I just want to go back real quick to the question you asked about property lines. So something I think we can do is on the drawings or the concept that was shown tonight, which is posted to the website, we can go in there and modify the property line so it's more definitive, and you can actually see, on the drawings we have, just a rough estimate of what the impact would be. Once we get to the further into design, then we'll have like a specific drawing that will tell you how much square footage we're talking about.
Yep.
But in the meantime, we can just make that edit and make it more visible for you.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
You know, I might have missed this, but what are the criteria? You mentioned that the funding, this is funding from the federal and the state, right? So what are the criteria that led us to decide that this is the project?
It might be a little more close to the town, but I know they had approached us to help them to try to meet some of their goals that were in your 2021 master plan. Some of them being safety, other ones being connectivity, especially along East Main Street. And so I think that's kind of where this project came from. I don't know if I want to speak a little more to that.
So kind of big picture, there's only certain roads in the town that are eligible for Mass DOT funding. And somebody can correct me if they know, but it's federal money that's then delegated to the states, and then they apply it to certain transportation projects. And so every road in our town isn't eligible for this funding. So Route 30, 135, there's probably a couple others that meet the threshold for the money. So that kind of reduces you to a certain number right there across the town. And then looking at the town based on our plan, our master plan, the intent from that was to look at corridors. So the 135 corridor, the West Main Street corridor, the Milk Street corridor, and East Main Street corridor. And so we looked at a couple of options, basically one on the west side of town on West Main Street and one on the east side of town. And back in 2022, so several years ago, when we were weighing these options, we wanted one that was competitive because we had to do a lot of work just to get to the point where they made a decision, and they could have said no. We spent 2 years just getting to that point. So we wanted something that was going to be competitive. So of the options we had, this one was the most competitive, and from the standpoint of had the most right of way, although there are impacts, which we recognize, these are the least amount of impacts to the abutting property owners. And it was solving problems the town already had identified. The East Main Flanders intersection has been a problem that's been identified by the town for, like I said, 20 years. And we acknowledge that there's still challenges, and a signal isn't going to make it perfect. But to your point, we had to narrow down, and there's constraints that exist already that we had to work within. And we used our own judgment based on guidance the town has given us. We said that this is the most competitive option. And we did run some of those by Mass DOT. So I think we had 2, maybe 3 options, and we kind of floated them in front of them to see which one was the most competitive. And that kind of steered us to this one, which got us something in motion.
So then, how did it get to the point where, okay, I recognize Flanner Road because I lived for a long time. I lived here. I know Flanner Road is a problem. I need to be solved and priorities, right? And but how did it piggyback into like how to widen the road, put the bypass into it that would solve Flanner Road problem?
So a requirement associated with the Mass DOT funding is improvements to bike and pedestrian mobility. So we couldn't just go to Mass DOT and ask for money to repave East Main Street and put something in Flanders Road without doing other things that improve bike and pedestrian access. That goes along with the project.
Stipulation is
That's
you
right.
could do anything else, but you have to improve biking and can we pick like there's the roads that have a lot of potholes, right? I'm so afraid sometimes I'm driving, I'm afraid my tire will pop because, and is that also a consideration that we could use for that as a priority over the biking path and walking pedestrian?
So the way they rank these projects, you have to understand, when we put all these projects into this review committee, you're fighting with every other community within your district for funding. And so you have to pick projects that are going to score high to Mass DOT. And unfortunately, just paving projects do not score high. And even the Flanders Road intersection, it's a huge efficiency problem, but it's not an extremely high crash location for your district. And so those numbers don't make it score high. So if we had just put in for just the intersection and paving, I can't guarantee it, but I can almost promise it probably would have been rejected by the state. By putting in more multimodal pedestrian safety and doing it over a longer stretch, made this project kind of jump to the head of the list for your district. And then the same idea is kind of what Chris said here, is that once Massachusetts is giving you the money to help with construction, you kind of have to follow their standards because they now have a stake in the project. So one of them is that if we're doing a whole corridor and paving it, they're going to make you update curb ramps. They're going to make you put in bicycle facilities. They're going to make you put in pedestrian facilities. And sometimes, like Chris said, sometimes that is sidewalk, a bike lane. The easiest way for us to have the least amount of impacts is to make it all one facility at a shared use path and make it 8 feet wide. It was the easiest way for us to mitigate the impacts, but still have a high scoring project that would potentially get accepted by Mass DOT.
And we keep saying Mass DOT, and I don't want to make it sound like Mass DOT is a bad entity. We're getting lots of money from them. But we also have our own policy that says, and I didn't make the policy myself, it's a town policy that says we'll have a complete streets approach to our roads, our road network, which means when we do improvements to a road, we are expected, like the Public Works Department, who's responsible for that work, is expected to look at other opportunities to do on that road besides just paving the street. So if you look at other roads around the town, we did several this summer. If you go on West Main Street, we just installed a sidewalk and a crossing location on West Main Street because we're doing some road improvements on West Main Street, and we incorporated ADA ramps and other things along the path, so or along that corridor. So it's not, the funding we're going after is tied to Mass DOT and they have requirements, but the town, and I know that doesn't mean every person in this room necessarily, but whatever you consider the town, we consider the town the documents that are given to us that tell us what to do, the master plan, complete streets policy, and other things. And those things indicate that the town wants mobility along East Main Street and the other corridors. And so we pursued opportunities to make those improvements. And at the end of the day, if the town decides, the town being you or anybody else, we don't want it, then we won't do it. But we're doing what we think the town asked us to do in the most cost-efficient way, because we're using somebody else's money to get it done. Because we wouldn't be able to.
I appreciate the reason
Yeah.
behind it, because I didn't really know whether it was a well-known reason for how we get here, and then we decide that we will widen the road, and we put bypass on.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, it's a great question, because there's a lot to it. I mean, you're bringing up issues and comments, the comments about going under the bridge and other ones that have been highlighted, which we can incorporate, and those are added to the list of dozens of other things we've already tried to factor in, and you're bringing up more, which is great.
And don't get me wrong, I love bypass. I think that's like exercise, the whole, I really like that, right? But there's also, I'm concerned about safety, not only safety for people, but safety for the motorcyclists too, right? I mean, if you're sitting on the corner and you compete with a car going 40, 50 miles an hour, you lose, basically, right? And if you don't have, yes, you don't have the right of way, but also there's all around us, there's others. We feel like, we live in that area, 198, right? I want that property, I want to grow, okay? But like Ralph said, I will not be able to shuffle my 8 feet driveway. And as I get older, I may not be able to afford it either, right? And so that's something that I want to look ahead. I feel like good deeds go unpunished, basically. I'm providing, or we are willing to open up something for our neighbors and for everybody, but at the same time, there is some sort of impingement on my part, right? And so some of that, hope that when you design, I hope you take into consideration.
Yeah, that's really why we have this public process. Because same with me, I'm a homeowner myself. Like I want to make sure that I have a say in what's going on in my community. Because again, I'm just a civil engineer. I work on these projects, I do these projects, but you guys are going to live there, like you said. You want a lot of you want this is your home. You're going to live in for the rest of your life. You want to make sure that what's done there is something that you want and that you guys want it as a community, because it really is for you guys. And so that's why I'm very open. Don't be afraid to contact me with your concerns. I really want to hear them. So I want to make sure at the end of this that you guys like the project as much as I like the project, as much as the town likes the project. We want to make sure we all feel inclusive in this. Can you make everybody happy? 100% not just from experience. But at least I want to make sure that you're heard and I'm understanding what you're saying. And at least I can say, we're trying to do this if we can. So that, again, that's why my contact's up here. Please don't be afraid to email your concerns, questions, anything you have. Please don't feel free to email me. I'll make sure to log it, record it, get back to you. So I really want you guys to want this project, like this project, and feel involved in this process.
I have a question. Kristen made a website that lists the town's biggest projects. I assume this is going to be on that, and updates will be posted there.
Yeah, it's on there now.
It's on there
Yep.
now, and all the updates will happen. And will you then, as you get closer, put things on Permit Pro, or will they stay on that website? If people want to, I assume you're gonna. There's going to be.
If you were
multiple-
following the project, that would be the
Yeah.
site. I think, did you show? There was a QR code, maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
So there'll be revision control, so you can go in and look and say, okay, I looked at Rev 1 and I don't have to look again until I know it goes to Rev 2, and you'll be able to tell. Because I've looked at Permit Pro and stuff, at different projects now, and there's no revision. I come from an engineering and high-tech background.
Yeah.
And everything's ISO certified and ISO controlled, and you have to have revisions and dates and stuff. And Permit Pro right now doesn't have any concept of revision control, and we just slap on numbers and they make them up, and you can have the same document with have 10 numbers on there.
Right.
Will this have more control, so I won't be reviewing Rev 1, looking at, be able to tell revision 1 from revision 2 from revision
Yes,
3 and dates?
yes. I mean, Permit Pro is for everything that happens in the town. We're talking specifically about transportation projects on that website. So there's only a half dozen or whatever the number is. And those are managed by us and more deliberately than Permit Pro, which we don't all have, involvement in.
Great. So then one other technical question kind of. So according to Google, it says you can have a minimum travel lane of 10 feet. Is that true?
This being a state road and the amount of trucks and vehicles you have, 100%. Certain areas, 100%. This was a different type of roadway with less vehicle traffic, but a major road that is technically a state route that's owned by the town. Most of it's owned by the town, maintained by the town. 11 foot is what it's in, especially with the trucks, the amount of traffic. Again, if we go down to that 10, you potentially have some issues where he talked about where maybe you won't be able to slip by or something like that. Especially if you get these bigger trucks. We just want to make sure that if we narrow it, you can, but then other people are going to start feeling uncomfortable, whether you're on that sidewalk, move it closer. Also, now you have less room between the car and the vehicle. So definitely for this, when we look at the speeds and the traffic volumes and the truck traffic we get, 11 foot is the minimum. And then the 4 foot shoulder is also the minimum.
So have you thought about the 25 mile an hour speed limit for the town? Need we slow everybody down?
Have we thought about it in terms of?
On this stretch of Route 30, have you thought about changing the speed limit to 25? Or can you?
So we could change the speed, but if the 85 percentile speed of the roadway is higher than that,
She's
Yeah.
talking about an act where they can.
Oh, an act, yeah.
Adopt and take everything 25%. I don't know if the state route is excluded.
It may not apply to that road, it's
Yeah.
a state road though.
That's why I'm
Our committee, Suzanne's on the ATSC with you, we have discussed this. And Suzanne, if we did do a townwide 25 mile per hour speed limit, it would not apply to state roads like this one, is my understanding.
Well, I thought you just said the town owns part of it, so that's why I'm asking.
Oh, yeah.
yes, but the town does own most of Route 30 except for right by the Route 9 interchange. But state routes still have things that the town has to follow because they're technically used by all state users.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Could the town?
I mean, they can definitely look into whether that one falls into that category or not.
It's something that could be looked at. It's not something we've looked at and had any intention of looking at least immediately in terms of adjusting.
Because I would think for safety perspective, if you have everybody going 25, it would be safer for everybody
100%.
at all these intersections, and walking, and biking, and everything else too.
Yes, and I'm not disputing it. It really, 25 is fine for me, but that does drive other impacts that would have to be addressed before we could just, as I think we wouldn't just arbitrarily do that. It require a process, and so that's something that potentially the town could look at, but it's not something we were looking at right now.
Quick follow-up question. David Buffo with 260 Union Street. On the lane widths, 11-foot travel lanes, you said is a reduction from the current width? Or
No, so you guys have 11 foot through there right now. What we're more reducing is actually the shoulder width. So down by McDonald's, there, especially as you got close to the bridge, there were some pretty wide shoulders there. And then even north of that location, we had some wider shoulders. So we actually stole from that shoulder to make it a minimum of 4. Again, hopefully try to slow people down through those locations.
Rick Honorado, 5 Sampson Drive. The signal landers, and obviously that has a huge impact. We're already somewhat trapped with the traffic. And I've emailed the town a couple of times about that. The ability to take a right-hand turn off of Flanders to East Main. Right now, there's kind of 2 lanes, but not really, it's not marked that way. Is there a way that would be easier to do so that you can get some of that, traffic that wants to turn right off? And there isn't traffic that way, I agree. I mean, the traffic between 4 and 6, I mean, again, we, on Flanders and East, Sampson and, in those neighborhoods get pretty trapped. And again, our street is used to cut through, trying to get, that little portion right. So,
Yeah, that's understood. So like I said, we haven't done too much of the traffic operations yet, but we can definitely evaluate if we can formalize it to be a left and or right turn lane, because it is currently a wide lane that's used for left and right turns. Right now it's not too safe because you have like a vehicle going left, like trying to go left, you can't see around them, trying to get out going right. Hopefully a signal would help
the same thing
too
happens
with the safety of that.
When somebody's taking the left, somebody's trying to go to right,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the signal, that's the hope, is that we kind of, solve some of those safety concerns. But we can definitely still evaluate formalizing the left and the right turn lanes from coming from Flanders to help. Yeah.
Yeah, and like Andrew said, we still have to evaluate it, but we're hoping also that the signal itself hopefully gives drivers confidence to make those turns and are like double, triple check with all these things, that if they have a light there, they know if they have a green light, they should be the ones to be able just to make that turn. So not like we're the vehicle coming from this direction and vehicle coming from this direction.
and there's just certain parts of that a light, it's not gonna matter, because you're not moving.
Well, like Andrew said, we still have to do a full traffic analysis of the entire corridor. We looked at certain spots just in the beginning to try to pick what would be the best based on impact and cost. But now we're going to start getting into actual 25% design. We'll start looking at actual lane distributions, like Andrew said, whether it's appropriate to add a right and left turn lane there, stuff like that.
The light, I would assume, would be somewhat synchronized with the Lyman Street, so that, you're not, if it's red down there, it's green here, and nobody can.
Yeah, that's something that can be evaluated. I think Chris mentioned it earlier, but we'll look at all of the traffic in here and all the signals, and we'll try to evaluate, see what can be done. Obviously, we're not trying to make traffic worse than it is.
We look at all adjacent intersections and facilities to the project always to make sure everything's working as efficiently as possible. Again, like you said, traffic sometimes is traffic, and there's just so many cars on the road you can do, but we try to at least make sure that it's the best efficiency throughout the entire corridor as possible.
John Caprioli, Cromwich Road. You're the project manager, right?
Yes, for HSH, yep.
Mr. Lyman, right?
Yep.
Okay. As a rough rule of thumb, design costs can be 10% of project costs. What is your, which is 800,000 on an $8 million project, right? What is your projected total design costs for this project, start to finish? If the town is paying for.
Yep, so I think the first, we have a notice to proceed right now with the town that I think is 250,000 roughly.
Yeah.
And that, basically got us up to this location, which basically from, project to here. We just put in another, proposal to the town, which I think is roughly 1.2 million, I think, something like that. So it's falling right along what you said. It's about 10%.
So you're looking for $1,500,000 for this project?
Potentially, again, there's some mitigating factors in there too about what is necessary.
What's the final figure going to be after the mitigating factors are incorporated into the bill that you submit to the community?
Yes, so I'll let the
So
town
the-
talk about it, but
So the design costs are paid out of our Chapter 90 funds, which are state funds as well.
There's state funds that can be used for something else.
Yes. Yep. So the town is allocated an amount of money every year, just like every town in Massachusetts. That money is typically used for repaving of roads and the additional work I mentioned earlier, sidewalk ramps and other things associated with whatever corridor we're working on. So we've taken portions of certain years of Chapter 90 funding and applied it to the design costs associated with this project. And we started this in about 23, spending money. It's going to at least 30, so 7 years. So that funding, that 1.4 or whatever it ends up being, and this is estimates, right? Because we haven't done the work yet. That funding is then spread over those 7 years through our Chapter 90 funding. So we're not taking all of it. We don't even get that much in a year to pay for one, pay for it all. So the bottom line is, yes, we're paying for a design cost. We're not coming to the town for the town specifically for that cost. We're using money that's already allocated to the town and prioritizing it on this versus something else.
You're using money that could be used for paving roads?
Yes, we are.
Just as a personal comment, I think the paving of this roads of this town is problematic. There's bumps everywhere, sunken manhole covers. You're not doing a very good job of paving the roads. If you want to drive around with me, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Really, I'm serious.
Well,
under your stewardship, the roads are in worse shape than before you got here.
Well, we actually have a pavement management plan that assesses we have a plan that has assessed all of our roads. And if the town wants to come up with $6 million, then we could go fix all of those issues that you're identified. But the town has not provided that funding. We've chosen not to come to the town to ask for that funding because there's been other requirements that the town has laid on the table for the town to fund. So we've made do with the funding we get through Chapter 90 to take care of our roads. There's plenty of towns nearby that every year they contribute money in addition to Chapter 90 towards their roads, and that's how they supplement the shortfall. We have a shortfall, just like every other town. We're not funding it, and so that's a contributing factor to if your opinion is that our roads are in bad shape.
It's not.
That's not my opinion. That's not what the data says. We have a report that tells us the conditions of a road. So, are there sections of road that need to be paved? Of course, and any place in the United States has that. So, our funding is there. It's from the state. We could always ask for more and do more, but based on the town's priorities, we've chosen to request funding for meaning the town staff has prioritized other efforts for town funding, and we're utilizing out of town funding to pay for our roads. That's how it works.
Well, you're taking away $1.5 million that could go to paving the roads.
But that $1.5 million is paying to get us an $8 million road. So, there's a trade-off.
I've lived here for a long time. Nobody really walks there. I drive as far as the post office and.
That area.
They built when they built it.
I walk.
Yep, I do too.
So we got the whole population of Westboro that wants to go. in this.
I will say though, for the cost of the design, 1.4, 1.5, this project does include paving over a mile of roadway. And in my opinion, 1.5 million for a mile of roadway is a pretty decent price if you're gonna pave.
Plus sidewalk ADA improvements.
Yeah.
If I can just, I'd like to interject on the 10% rule of thumb for design fee. That's not a true number. That is not the number for a Mass DOT project. The number is more like 15 to 18%, and it depends on the complexity of the project. And also, when we talk about this $1.4 million, there's a lot more than just design in there. There's survey, there's traffic analysis, there's subsurface utility investigations, there's right-of-way, and that's why the number is more like 15 to 18% on average. And sometimes it's higher than the 18%, sometimes it's lower than the 15%. Rarely ever is it 10% on a project of this nature, just because of all of the requirements, reviews, and other things related that aren't specifically designed, but gets lumped into the design terminology.
I'd like to interject here as a MassDOT project manager. We review all work hours proposed by design consultants to make sure that MassDOT thinks they're reasonable for the type of work and the amount of work being done. So we can't, it's not a blank check. The 10% rule is absolutely not accurate, but it's not a blank check either.
Yeah, and I want to add in too, the reason why I'm saying it stipulates is in the first notice we got from the town, we had a much larger dollar amount on that because sometimes that ice process I talked about at Flanders Road can be extremely expensive. And honestly, I'll give Angela a lot of credit here. She said, well, we tried to get an abbreviated ice process, which was extremely cheaper than, I mean, we've had an ice process that cost $200,000. Our ice process was much cheaper than that because we tried to help the town save money. We approached Master T up front and said, what do you guys think about, we really think a signalized intersection is really the only feasible option here. Can we just skip ahead and just say we agree on this? They did the analysis, they agreed with our analysis, and so we were able to save the town money there. So again, I'm not, us at HSH and working with the town, we're not trying to, gouge you with money. I'm trying to really help you guys get a good project at a reasonable price. And I really am trying to do that. And I will try to help work with the town, work with Master T to try to be as efficient with your guys' funds as possible. Because again, I live in a city and a town also. I don't want my tax dollars spent wasted. I feel the same way as you, so I'm trying to do the same by you guys. Any other questions?
So we thank everybody for coming and appreciate your feedback. We've got all the notes. As we mentioned, there's a website that the concept is posted to. We'll make the updates to that so you can see the property impacts. As we move forward, certainly feel free to reach out, like Chris has said, but really the next big target would be next summer when we get this 25% design done. And that's followed by another, this is a formal, like the meeting tonight was something we injected because we wanted to do it as a town. The design public hearing, which occurs will occur next year after the 25% design, that's mandated by MassDOT's process for this program we're part of. So that would be the next major step is late next summer, the design public hearing.
Thank you for setting this up.
Thank you.
If I can step in and just give a few kudos, sorry to interrupt laughing, but I think the town has done an excellent job in, looking at the interests of the town are. I'm a former DPW director, but my primary career has been in engineering consulting. I've done engineering consulting for about 30 years, DPW director for about 7 years. Chris has done one of the most outstanding jobs I've ever seen of a DPW director, understanding all of the decisions and criteria that goes into something like that, from the ground zero that we described tonight. Not only Chris, but your town planner and your group and the way they manage and are planning on maintaining a website like this, having a public informational meeting like this. A lot of cities and towns don't even do this. You all's participation has been outstanding. The number of people that have been at this meeting tonight and the comments that we received have been really informative to us and to the design. It's exactly the type of thing that we're looking for. Tonight, I think, has been very productive, and I want to appreciate all of you all too. So thank you for giving me that moment.
Again, don't be afraid to contact me. I want to hear it.
Thanks for doing what you do.
All right, try to stay warm. It's cold out there.